Yes, well, in fact, it actually goes off from what I've just been talking about. We have been given such a false version of everything that what I suggest we need is what I call the blank sheet of paper, where we put aside all preconceived idea of what we believe about anything, and we get the blank sheet of paper. Now we're going to look at everything afresh, and it's going to justify its place on the paper, in other words, our perception of reality, based on information, intuitive knowing, all these things, instead of what someone has already told us, parents, teachers, journalists, scientists, that we should believe about something. And one of the things you find, very common theme, is when you take so-called scientific fact and you chart it back to its origin, you find that it's not fact at all. It's a theory, an assumption that's been perceived as fact by constant repetition. So what happened to me, so in terms of scientific, this is how things are, I don't accept that. Blank sheet of paper, it might be true, but it's got to justify itself to me. I'm not just accepting it because you're telling me. And one of the sequences that started after the Betty Shine meetings was that I would get an insight out of nowhere, and from that moment, and it might be a strange thing, like, what? And from that moment, information starts coming into my life, and people and what have you, personal experiences relating to that insight, which basically saying, see, the insight was right, look. And these are the pieces of the puzzle being given to me, which is why I say, if it was left to the David Icke level of me, I wouldn't have been anywhere near, what I'm doing now. And so I went into that office we were in earlier, and I sat down one morning when I was writing a book called Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. And when I sat down, this voice, a strong thought form, went through my head out of nowhere. Worse to the effect of, the moon's not real, the moon's not what you think it is. Now most people are going, oh, what? No, come on, carry on with your day. But because I've been through it so often over 20 years, 20 years by then, I thought I'll go with this. So I then put into NetFind, search engine, combination of words that the moon is not natural. And up came immediately a book called Who Built the Moon by two researchers, I'd not come across it before, who were looking at the facts about the moon, the incredible anomalies about the moon, and the extraordinary mathematical connections between the moon, the earth, and the sun. And their conclusion, with evidence, was that the moon had to be some kind of construct. And I'd thought about this in the past every now and again, but then it was just fleeting and you got on with your life. But now it was time to focus on this. And the bits and the puzzle pieces came in, and I put this thing together. And I didn't realize that until I started doing that two Russian scientists from the Soviet Academy of Scientists in 1970 wrote a detailed article basically asking the question, is the moon some form of extraterrestrial spacecraft? And again, the longer we talk, the more everything kind of connects to everything else. I mentioned earlier that one of the greatest ways of suppressing human perception is to suppress the perception of the possible. And if we're going to understand what's happening to us, we have got to redefine our perception of what is technologically possible, and what is possible in terms of holographic projection, which can project things in ways that look absolutely solid and real, and you can interact with them in that way. Come to that. And because of the suppression of our sense of the possible, things like the moon not being a natural body is, like, to most people, it's ridiculous, because they can't conceive that it's possible. But we, because of the suppression, have been living in the technological Stone Age. And thus, what's happening around us, which is technologically massively more advanced than we think is possible, is happening without people questioning it, because we couldn't perceive there's anything to question. It's got to be real. And I say this, imagine back in the Stone Age, when there's this guy sitting there and he's knocking rocks together, and another guy comes over to him in the Stone Age, points to the moon and says, you know, it's possible to build something that flies like a bird right up to that moon. And he's knocking rocks together. That's his perception of the possible. So the idea that that is possible, ludicrous. You know, you've been on the mammoth juice, right? But even though to Stone Age people that was impossible, clearly it is possible, but only when you know how. And thus when people look at the moon, and I think other bodies too, and they say that no one could have constructed that, or at least hollowed out some natural type body and if you like, reconstructed it, they can't think it's possible, but it is. And when you look at the moon and you look at the anomalies, it's quite clear that it's not a natural body. It's either a completely unnatural body, or it has been, as these Russian scientists postulated, it's somehow some kind of hollowed out planetoid. I mean, look at it. Look at the size of the Earth and look at the size of the moon. It's massive. It shouldn't be there. And there are tribes that are still in existence that talk about the fact that their tribe goes back so far that it was before the moon was in the sky. And it's a thing that we, again, when we come out of the womb into this world, we tend to accept that what's here has always been here. But it isn't. I mean, I go into this in Remember Who You Are in some detail. Even the solar system that we see now has not been like that for that long in geological terms. And then when you, and I go into this in the book as well, because of an experience I had as a kid, then we can ask another question. Again, we're coming back to this blank sheet of paper. Is what we see out there, is it really there? Or is it some kind of holographic projection that we are decoding? Because we are taking waveform information, vibrational information fields, and we're decoding them into holographic reality. Therefore, we look into the great beyond and we see this vastness of space and the stars all that time away. But the only place they exist in that holographic so-called physical state that we're perceiving is in our decoding system. So there is actually the distances we perceive that everything is apart from everything else is merely that which we are decoding to be like that. So is it really there, or is it a projection? These are the things that we need to start asking and questioning on the blank sheet of paper, because all bets are off.